Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Wise Idea Podcast with Christopher J. Harris. I am your host, Christopher J. Harris, and I'm so excited to be the one to personally welcome you to this podcast, this platform, this venue, this space to be able to offer inspiring wisdom to you every single week. I'm honored that you take the time and have taken the time to hang out with us this episode. And I want to invite you to join us every single week. Every single Thursday, we leave a brand new podcast. We release this podcast to be able to inspire you and invoke wisdom in your life. Well, guess what? Every single week, we are focused and we are on mission to provide strategies for hearts to be inspired and heads to become wise. You guys are in for an incredible treat today because this is part 2 of last week's episode where we had our special guest, Mina Nyenke, talking about her life story of singleness and celibacy and the challenges of dealing with trauma and receiving a diagnosis with potential for trying to commit suicide and just so many other realities, heavy realities that she dealt with in her most recent past. And she is now using her platform to help inspire and encourage others in a very real way. And she got real and raw last week. And we go even deeper on today's episode of a woman's story, her testimony. I believe very clearly, guys, that we can learn from the story and testimony of others. And so that's why I have no problem interviewing folks like Mina. I'm so excited, really, because we also have next week another lady who is going to be sharing her story of what it means to be childless, but not by choice. You want to tune in next week. And then after that, we're going to have actually a live interview where I'll be interviewing a certified therapist on the backdrop of these episodes, where we're going to dig a little bit deeper and see how we need to live our lives better. And so I'm so excited that you tuned in today. Our goal is to inspire everyday people to live wise lives. And I'm personally passionate about life and leadership and family and marriage and ministry. That is the church. And so I believe that as I'm passionate about that, that is the focus of this podcast and what I believe will add value to your lives. John Maynard Keynes said one time that ideas shape the course of history. And I'd simply like to edit that a little bit and say that the wise ideas positively change the course of lives. Make no mistake about it, guys. I believe firmly, and I am convinced that when wisdom becomes a part of your life, your entire life gets better in every single area. So really quickly, let me get a couple just basic things out of the way before we jump into part 2 of this episode. Today, it's going to be incredible. I'm so excited for you to hear it. Let me just share a couple basic administrative things and logistical things and just some introductory things so that you can have this as a part of your purview today. If you are new to us, again, I want to remind you that we release a brand new podcast weekly on Thursdays. So you can follow us, you can subscribe to us. That way you'll get the information as soon as it's released. I also understand that a lot of you may listen to this podcast with friends and in groups. And I'd love to hear about those groups and listening parties that are literally happening around the world. So please send us an email, a message at info at thewисeideapodcast.com. Thank you to those of you that are already sharing the podcast and the tools and the show notes and the information with your family and friends and with your social media platform. That really, really means a lot to me. And I just want to personally say thank you for that. Again, I also want to tell you that The Wise Idea has show notes and resources that are available. You can go to our website, thewисeideapodcast.com, and see all of that information right there. I guess I also want to mention to you really fast that we are on iTunes, we're on Stitcher, we're on Google Play, we're on TuneIn. But particularly for those of you that listen to us on iTunes, I would be so honored. And please consider this an official request. Please go to iTunes and leave a review. I would love for others to find out about my podcast and also to be so inspired just like you are. So please go to iTunes and check this out. So with that said, guys, we're going to jump into today's episode with Mina. And the last thing I'll mention to you is that Mina's transparency should inspire you to look at your own story, to look at your own life, and see, in fact, where and in what areas you may need to really have someone to work with you on or to sit down with you on. We take so very seriously the reality of mental health issues, trauma, and what that means. And so, as Mina talks about her story, I want to invite you, if that's the reality where you find yourself, please don't suffer in silence. Reach out to us. We'll be glad to get you connected to somebody wherever you are that will be willing to sit down with you and help you. And if they can't, then we'll try to do our level best to help you in any way that we can. So, with that said, let's jump in to part 2 of this conversation that we're having with Mina Nyenke. So some people would argue, and I've seen lots of discussion online and in articles and on blogs. Some people would suggest that the church they take the stance that the church has not done a great job at empowering singles in a way where marriage is seen as the solution to life versus singleness seen as a viable option to live free. What's your take on that? What's your stance on that? Your thoughts on that?
I would say that I have to agree. There's nothing wrong with family. It's something that I desire, but for those of us, and I can only speak from being a woman, there's those of us, this life is not cookie cutter. It's not one size fits all. Everyone's story is different. Everyone's journey is different. And sometimes when one segment of the population is focused on and highlighted, it can give the impression or the feeling as if you're a second-class citizen almost. That's how I have felt at times. I don't feel like that anymore. And that's only because I've made a conscious decision to encourage, empower myself, and have some real hard conversations with God. But I know that there are other women that feel the same way too.
So, Mina, let me just be honest here. This is a great conversation. As a male pastor who's happily married with children, and hearing you say that, there's all kinds of questions that are running through my mind. So let me use this example, and I don't want to be insensitive in my example. So while this is recorded, I don't mind if you push back on this a little bit, and let's dialogue, because I want this to really be inspirational for those that are listening to this conversation. If I wanted a particular kind of car, and I have my eyes set on this particular kind of car, and this happens to a lot of people. I'm sure there's some sort of psychological phrase for this. I don't know what that is. But if I wanted this particular kind of car, and all of a sudden I would start seeing that car everywhere. It almost feels like, man, like everybody's got this car, right? Because this is the car that I want, and this car that I've researched, and I've printed a picture off from online, and I got it as a part of my goals and my vision board, and I'm looking at it every day, and I'm saving up money for it and all of that. But I see everybody seemingly like there's nowhere that I can go and I don't see this car. I guess my question becomes that if a person is single and they desire to have marriage, is it a similar concept where every time they turn around, they're seeing somebody getting married, or seeing a couple that looks happy, or they're seeing a family, or what have you, and that's kind of playing in the back of their mind? Or is that an oversimplification of a very nuanced and complex reality?
No, I would have to say you're accurate, and of course we don't compare cars to people and human beings, but it's very, very true, because I have a lot of friends who are my age and older, and I'll just say I'm going to be 40 this year, glory to the Most High God, and I know I'm a dime piece, but I have a lot of girlfriends who are my age or older, and their hope has become deferred. Unfortunately, we're in this social media and information age where if you're on Instagram or Facebook, you're going to see life happening for people. And at this time, people are getting married. You know, even though the divorce rate is super duper high, that still has not curtailed people from getting married. So you're going to continue to see marriages, elaborate proposals, baby showers, you know, engagements and weddings galore. And when you're constantly seeing that in your timeline, scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, it can make you feel like you're missing out, like you're not good enough. When is it going to be your turn? Yes, your hope for marriage, for family, for love can start to become deferred when there's something, and this can relate in different areas of life, but since we're talking about the area of relationships and marriage, your hope can start to become deferred. And you will take that. I know that women, because I have taken that and really attached my value as why something wasn't happening for me, but it was happening for other people, especially as a Christian woman when you're doing things the right way. Case in point for me, the way that I started off Mina Says this year was by going public with my personal celibacy testimony. I have been celibate now for almost 22 years. And early on in my celibacy walk, I thought that if I honored God with my body and did the right thing, that surely I would be rewarded quickly with marriage. And that has not been the case. So that has caused me to be introspective and have some conversations with God, like, hey, what's going on, man? Like I'm doing the right things here, and it hasn't happened for me, but I know sister so-and-so over there is doing all kind of leg praises, and she's gotten married, and her husband is fine, and he gets her whatever she wants. She has a nice ring, nice home. She doesn't have to work, you know, has beautiful children. And she was doing everything the wrong way, in air quotes. And here I am doing things the right way. Why is it not happening for me?
Yeah, it's interesting. This is such a layered and nuanced and heavy conversation. My wife and I, just a few months ago, taught a class at our church, and it was actually the class was being offered at the same time several other classes were offered, where folks could select multi-class options based on their particular demographic or their interests. And so my wife and I actually co-taught this singles class. And one of the first questions that came up in the class was, you guys are married. How do y'all teach a singles class? You know, and so it was really interesting to hear that perspective from that person that asked the question, that they felt like we were not qualified to even speak into the issues of singleness, and all of that, you know, being married, you know, multiple decades and being together that long and all of that stuff. And so from your perspective, you've asked a lot of questions. What are the solutions? How do we get individuals that are single to a place? And I'm going to come back to that celibacy thing in just a moment, because I think, you know, even saying that, even preparing for this interview, I looked up a few statistics, and I'm gonna put these in the show notes as well. But it was interesting because so few people today practice celibacy, and so few people even believe that it's possible. So from your perspective, what are some of the solutions? What do you say to a person who's single and, like you said, you know, you had goals and you went through your checklist, you know, learn how to cook, clean your house, you know, get your manicure, your pedicure done, work on your credit, get your health together, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then they're still waiting. What do you say? What are part of the solutions here?
Well, I would say, first of all, when you've done all of these things, depending on what your motivation is, you may need to re-examine the why. Why are you doing all of these things? And of course, the quick answer is because I want to get married and I want to have a family and I want to do, you know, you're going to say that. But let's dig a little bit deeper. And I'm saying that because these are things that I had to do. I had to re-examine what it is that I really, really wanted. Did I understand what the responsibility was that came along with being married and having children, how much my life would change? Was I ready for the change, or did I just want something nice and shiny? I also think it's a great opportunity for you to re-examine your relationship with God, because if you think that God is holding something back from you, that's going to skew the way that you interact and have relationship with him. If you think that, because the Holy Spirit had to check me and my heart, because here I am crying and lamenting about all the stuff that I'm doing, and why am I not receiving the benefits or the reward? And Holy Spirit was like, your singleness is a gift, and there's nothing you can do. Do you think that by you doing this thing that God owes you anything? Just like the gift of salvation is free, you can't work for salvation. It's freely given. So you can't boast about what you did to receive salvation. It's the same way with marriage. You can't do works to receive marriage. And when I got saved, I got redeemed from the curse of the law, but marriage was not a part of those, it wasn't in the fine print of like, this is part of your inheritance. This is part of your promise. So I got checked. I mean, you're talking about uppercuts to the gut, like, oh, did you have to do me like that, Lord? And so I had to really reevaluate my relationship with God and who I saw him to be, take the limits off him. Lord, if I know your character, or you know what, reintroduce me to your character, because how can I worship a God that I think is being mean and withholding something from me? Salvation is enough. There are other promises and inheritance that we have. And is God just enough? Now I have to look at the quality of my life. Okay, Lord, I'm willing to put this thing on the altar. It is my desire. You know about it. You know the deepest desires of my heart, but I'm willing to put this and lay it down and really, really just be okay with you. And when you see fit to do it, because you're going to do what you want to do. And I'm not going to be out here like Sarah and just doing what I want to do, because then I'm going to pay for it with the rest of my life. But Lord, I would encourage other women to really, really be introspective and have the courage to look inward, and check their heart about why they want certain things, and maybe reacquaint themselves with the word and not believing the status quo.
That's, man, you said so much. These scriptures you're throwing out and all that, I'm gonna have to do a separate podcast to explain, to make sure people understand things like, what does it mean to be redeemed from the curse of the law? That's good stuff. I love that. As a Bible teacher, I love that. It's interesting because, as I mentioned, we taught this class, and one of the statements that I feel like, was kind of inspired by the Holy Spirit for me. And I gave this to the class, and it became a part of our mantra for the class. It was a 6 weeks class. And so part of that mantra was, marriage isn't a cure and singleness isn't a curse. And, that really resonated with a lot of people. And I think that's what I hear you saying. And so in light of that, I hear you saying to those that are listening to this, that may be single, that whether you get married or not, you need to be whole yourself. You need to bring wholeness to yourself and walk in freedom for yourself, manage the trauma from your past, reevaluate and reexamine your why, being clear of what your relationship with God is like and about, and having the proper view of God. I love that you said that singleness is a gift. So with that being said, let's talk really nitty gritty here for a moment. So I saw your post on your Instagram page where you said, and this was a few months ago, so 21 years, 8 months, 30 days or something like that. You don't have to give me the specifics on it, but I made notes just prepared for this interview, where you've been celibate. So somebody's listening to this and they're saying, hey, there is no way that that's possible for me, right? Let's talk about that for a moment. Is this something that people still should pursue? Like, I know that we know the scripture, and I know that holiness is still right, and that there's a mandate that God puts on us as believers to live and to rise to the occasion. But what does that look like in real life for somebody that's listening to this and they're single? And particularly for the person that's listening to this and they're like, "But Christopher Harris, you're married. You you got somebody to go home to every night, right? So let's talk about that.
Well, I'll say that, and I'll always say this, yes, it's been 21 years, almost 22 years, but the journey has not been marked by perfection by any means. I started when I was 17, a few months shy of my 18th birthday. And, without getting, because it's a whole podcast in itself, but I got my little feelings hurt by somebody that I was dealing with. And at 17, knowing what I know now, I had abandonment issues because my father was never in my life. Grew up in a very toxic household, even with my mother, and just so much going on at the time. And I remember I was heartbroken because the guy basically, and I just knew at that moment that I did not want to ever lay down with another guy who would treat me that way. My initial decision had absolutely nothing to do with God. It had to do with me trying to protect my heart and basically put a fortress around it because I didn't want to have my feelings hurt. That's obviously not my reason for doing it now. There has been an evolution in the last almost 22 years. But I had so much going on in my life at a young age that I knew that if I got pregnant and brought a child into the world, it would greatly alter my life. And I had friends at that time who were teen moms from as young as 13. I have a girlfriend who has a son that's the same age as my little brother, and he's 26. And so, we're in school, and her son and my little brother, they're the same age. I mean, this is a very real thing for me. So it's evolved. I wasn't necessarily being encouraged by the church to do this. I kind of did this on my own. It was not easy. It still is not easy. For many years, I struggled on and off with pornography and masturbation. This is its own podcast in itself. So all I heard even from the church was, don't do it, don't do it. And I knew the reasons, like, okay, you don't want to have a baby out of wedlock. You don't want any diseases. But I also wanted to honor God with my body, but it was difficult. And even after the age of 35, I don't know. I think that some people think that when women are celibate, that their body doesn't work anymore. Like there's a switch that goes off and you don't feel things. You don't have hormonal things going on in your body. Because I'm gonna tell you, after the age of 35, something switched, and I would just be like, oh, okay. So that's what we on now. Like I can't go to sleep now because I'm horny like this now. Like it's very, very real. And there are practical things that you need to put in place to ensure that you don't fall, because it's not for lack of opportunity that I don't engage in sexual activity. I mean, I don't want to sound braggadocious or anything, but I know who I could call if I wanted something to get taken care of, but I choose not to. Not just because it's been such a long time and it would be idiotic for me to just throw away all of the time that I put in, but it really has to do with me and God. It really has to do with me honoring him with my body. I never intended for it to go this long. Never, ever, ever intended for it to go this long. I thought I would be married by 30. But hey, this is my story, and I am not ashamed of it at all. It's possible. I would like to encourage other young girls who are battling with the same things that I was. I can speak to that young lady, and I can speak to women in my age group, because when it all comes down to it, if I just don't want pieces of my soul scattered all over the Chicagoland area because I've just slept with people just because it felt good in the moment and it never amounted to anything.
All right, guys, we'll be right back. I know you are right in the middle of an incredible conversation and you were gleaning things from this incredible conversation that we're having currently. We'll get right back to it. I was enjoying myself as well, but I wanted to interject really quickly and just invite you, if you are listening to this podcast, that probably means that you are also on social media. Well, listen, I'm on social media. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. As a matter of fact, y'all, guess what? I'm also on Pinterest. I would love to have you as a part of my tribe, my following, my connection, my social media family. And so if you're on any of those platforms, I'm at CJ Harris. O-N-E, CJ Harris, O-N-E. Would love to connect with you. So while this commercial is even going on, before we get back into the conversation, why don't you go online right now, pull your devices out, pull your computer out, and hit the follow button, hit the friend request button, hit the engage button, and we'd be so glad to have you as a part of our social media following and family. Not only that, as you listen to this podcast, you may be hearing things that are insightful for you, things that are being shared where the light bulb goes off. I would love to hear about those moments. As a matter of fact, you may be listening and there may be questions that you have or things you'd like to share with us that you're hearing. And either way, we'd love to hear from you. So please send us an email. The email address is info, I-N-F-O, at ChristopherJHarris.com. Again, that's info at ChristopherJHarris.com. Not only that, but lastly, if you have a project or a book or a platform that you'd like to promote or advertise with us, you're thinking that this would be a great audience for you to reach and connect with, we'd love to start a conversation with you about that. So please send us an email, again, at info at ChristopherJHarris.com. And in turn, we'll send you an information sheet and be glad to start that incredible conversation of partnership with you. With that said, guys, let's get right back into this amazing conversation that we're having. Be sure to pull your notes back out. It's going to be fun. Let's go. So tell me this. You said that there's some practical things that you need to do. What are some of those? Just give us maybe 3 or 4 of those practical things that would be helpful for people to do that will allow them to walk out this journey of what it means to be celibate. And I think even if you could make those relevant for all ages, I'm even thinking about teenagers, and I've got a teenage daughter, and she's got teenage friends, and they do these parties. And so, obviously as a dad who has a daddy's girl, this is a concern for me, So what are some of those practical things that people can do?
Well, so for all ages, I would say you should never be in a position where you're by yourself with a young boy, especially late at night, or a man late at night. I had a high school sweetheart. So I dated the same guy from freshman year all the way up to senior year. And because my father wasn't in my life and I didn't get affirmation from any man, not an uncle, not anything, the first time I heard "you're beautiful" from my high school sweetheart, that was the seed that was planted. And then by the time I was a junior in high school, it only made sense to go ahead and go that route. But I had a little bit too much freedom because I found myself alone with my then boyfriend at night, sometimes at his parents' house while his parents were at home. And they would be in the next room and they had no clue. So for the teenage girl, go home, don't be home with a boy. Kids are sneaky.
We're really saying both genders. If you're male, listening to this, I think, just so that you're clear, she's also saying just being careful that you're not even in a space with a female, alone, where things could happen and there's no accountability. But here's the other reality too, Mina, and I think we have to acknowledge this, that we live in a pluralistic society now, and so 30 years ago, we probably would have been safe to say just don't be in a room with a person of the opposite sex if this is something that you're trying to do. But because of where we are as a culture, I think we have to say that you have to just be mindful when you're in a room alone with anyone.
True.
Unfortunately,
True.
I mean, that's the reality that I think we live in.
It's true. Another thing I would say is to be very mindful about what you're listening to and what you're watching, because those things can trigger things within you. For me, I flourished in the 90s, so there's certain things I can't listen to as far as music is concerned. So for me, that's like Jodeci, R. Kelly, Lil Maxwell or something. Like, there's certain types of music that I can't listen to, because not only will it take me back to a time, but the lyrics and the music will incite something even physiologically within me that will entice me and make me feel a certain kind of way. I know music has changed a bit, so some music is very, very graphic in the hip hop world, but the things that you hear have a great deal to do with what goes into your subconscious. Also, the things that you watch, the things that you see. If you're on social media, I would advise you, for women in my age demographic, you got to stop following certain people. You got to stop following the beard gang men who got their shirts off, stop taking screenshots and looking at them later. Like, you have to be careful about what comes in your eye gate, even on TV, where, oh yes, I did too. Sure did. I don't care if it's Idris Elba, Michael B. Jordan, the Black Panther, whoever. Like, you cannot follow these people or continue to look at them, because you will start to fantasize about things, and that can lead to you trying to recreate scenarios and get involved in stuff. Men, you can't follow every booty model out there. Like, that's going to entice you in a way. There's certain movies, even television shows, that are very, very popular that everybody watches. You may not be able to watch, or you may have to fast forward through certain scenes, because there's certain shows where as soon as the opening credits are done, bam, they're like getting it on. And
so Mina, hold on for just 1 second, because I hear you talking, and I'm trying to process this from the standpoint of the kinds of questions that I've gotten and conversations that I've been privy to. A person could be listening to this, and if they're single, they could be thinking, well, man, what can I do? Right. And so let's flip the script for just a minute. Well, these are some practical things that people should not do, but what are some things that they can do? Because I believe that oftentimes when we replace something, we've got to replace it with something. So what are things that they can do? Because somebody's listening to this podcast right now, and I promise you that they may be thinking, well, man, I just need to sit in an empty room by myself for the rest of my life. It needs to be a white wall, so it's not the color that it's an emotion. I'm going to delete all of my social media. I can't go to the movies. I can't eat certain foods. I can't eat no fruit. I can't drink certain things, and that's where people's minds go often. So what are some things that they can do that will allow them? Because, the truth is that God is the originator and the creativity of all things creative and fun and innovative. And it's not boring to be a Christian. It's not boring to be a Christian faith. So what are some things that they can do?
Okay, I totally get it, because I've heard people say to me, that's too much. You're doing too much. But for what I'm believing for, right. But for me personally, what I'm doing is breaking curses that were in my bloodline. So that's why, I continue to soldier on. But I would say, for the person who's listening, male or female, you need to get a life. You need to get a life. You need to be busy. And not busy to the point where you're just like trying to avoid things, but like get involved in activities that interest you. There's more to life than just going to work and going home, going to the grocery store, going to church, and then that's it. There are things that you can do. You can hang out with friends. I particularly like to step. So every now and then I'll take a stepping class. I enjoy going to the gym. I enjoy going out to different events, not just movies, but I like to go to art galleries or different talks that are happening at museums and things. Like, get a life. Like, you're not, even if you were sexually active, you can't do that all doggone day. I mean, you might have a good 5-10 minutes, maybe, whatever. But there are other things that you can do in your life that are enjoyable. How about you read a book? That's what I'm doing. I'm trying to reduce my time on social media by actually putting my face back into a book and not scrolling as much, filling my mind with information. You can go to school. I mean, take a class on how to cook, and not just so you can get married. Do some activities with friends, travel. I mean, if you just live life, you will find yourself in a place where you're not necessarily thinking about it all the time. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be on social media. I'm just saying be mindful of what you watch. I'm not saying you shouldn't watch TV or you shouldn't go to the movies. I'm just saying being mindful about what you watch. You can still live life. You can still dance. You can still go to parties. You can still laugh. You can go to comedy shows. You can do the things that you would normally do. Just be very aware about what your personal triggers are, because maybe what would be a trigger for me may not be a trigger for you. It's about how important the end goal is to you.
That's really good. That's really good. So with that said, I want to ask you two more questions here real quick, because our time is getting away from us today.
Okay.
How can the church reposition itself to have these discussions in a healthy way? There are some people, Mina, I literally had discussions with, who say that the church is actually the culprit of keeping sisters single. Let's talk about that for a moment. What can the church do to be a part of the solution and not be labeled as a part of the problem?
That's a really good question. I don't know if I have the exact answers to that, because one might say, well, just have a singles ministry. And quite honestly, I don't think that is the answer, because I've been in singles ministry for a long time and I'm just not here for it anymore. Most of it is filled with women anyway. And like, I'm just kind of over it. I'm over like church as usual. If you notice with a lot of my posts, although it is laced with biblical principles, I'm not overly churchy. But I believe if we focus on not making the single people feel like the next big thing for you to do as a step in your life is to get married, and to really, really, really be okay and have people that they can relate to that are in their season of life to kind of speak to them, and so that they can see that living a single life is possible. I would say that for the vast majority of my life, when I have been involved in single ministry, there has been a lot of married people that are talking to single people. And so, not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think there are single people that other singles need to talk to other singles while they're single, who are doing it successfully, who are flourishing and living life. They need to see that it's possible and it's okay. There's nothing wrong with me being in this state. I think that would be a great start.
I think that's good. And I appreciate your humility in even saying, that you're not sure that you have the complete answer for that. For those that are listening to this, if you're involved in a church, or particularly if you're a leader at a church, a pastor or a staff member, one of the things that I would recommend is simply an awareness of things that we say or do, being much more intentional as a church of how singles may view it, and even how couples may view it. Particularly because, as pastors, many pastors are married, and that's male and female. Some people listening to this may not immediately believe in female pastors. I am of the persuasion that women can be pastors. But in either case, there's this notion and this idea that if we don't at least have an awareness of language and conversations, and even how we market things and how we position things in the church without great intentionality, that they could be seen as offensive. Very transparently, a number of years ago, our staff, we were reading a book called The Emotionally Healthy Leader by Peter Cesaro. It's an incredible book. And in that book, one of the chapters, two of the chapters, one talks about how to be, fully present in your marriage if you're married. The other chapter, one of the other chapters talks about, how to be whole in your singleness. And there were some very practical things that a couple of our staff members who are single challenged us as pastors on. One thing was, for example, don't assume that singles have more time than married people. And so, if there was an issue that came up and somebody needed to sacrifice some time to either, close the building up or go do this project or go serve this family or help this family out, it was this notion that, the unspoken was that the singles had more time than the married people.
Right.
We adjusted that. We had to adjust what that looks like and how we manage those conversations and interactions. Another idea was that we assumed that singles enjoyed certain activities just because they were single. So for us, it became not only an awareness, but then also a conversation. Let's create a conversation so that we can hear what's being said from those that are in that space, and then give them a seat at the decision-making table.
Absolutely.
Activities and engagements and involvement. So
I do want to say one other thing for people in the church. Sometimes the church does promote marriage as this crown jewel, but a lot of people who are single do see marriage and see how marriage is done in the church, and they nah, we good over here. You might think that what you got going is really popping and you're not really making marriage look good or attractive. We're actually doing better on our side. So that's something to consider too.
My goodness, I'm going to have to invite you back on that topic alone, because I think that's a fine line that the church has to walk. Number one, the Bible does encourage us to that marriage should be held in high honor, high esteem. But that doesn't mean, I believe, at the expense of making singles feel like they are less than or that they can't be whole and happy in their singleness. But the other reality, too, is that in some churches, not all, but in some churches, people have not seen a healthy picture of marriage and a healthy picture of what it means to stay married, and even the reality that marriage is not this perfect pie in the sky, that there are times where couples, argue or not on the same page, or have days where they're aggravated at one another, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that is a whole other reality that we've got to look at and wrestle with and deal with. What are some books and some resources that you, over your journey of singleness and wholeness and health, that you've read and watched, or videos you've watched, or what have you, that you think would be helpful for people to kind of grab a hold of?
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, let me start off with one of my absolute favorite teachers on relationships, and that would be the late Dr. Miles Monroe. He is, I say is, not like he doesn't exist anymore. He just is not here on earth with us, but he has tremendously rich teaching on YouTube, hours and hours and hours, about the importance of singleness, and even how important it is to still remain single even within marriage. And he has a number of books that I have on my bookshelf, but they're over there. But if you just look on Amazon and maybe just type in his name and just look through his catalog, he has a lot of great books as well to go along with those teachings. I believe in not just listening to teachings on YouTube or podcasts, or even reading a book one time, because you're not going to be able to retain all of the information. So I am one of those people that will listen and listen over and over and over again to certain teachings. I enjoy R.C. Blake's. I'm just kind of peeking over at my bookshelf to see if I can see something. There are just so many other resources. I maybe can make a list and come back and give them to you, but I enjoy hearing from men and women
Yeah, that'd be great if you could put a list together that you feel like would be helpful, and I can include those books in our show notes for this particular podcast.
Okay, will do.
That would be very helpful. This has been an incredible conversation, and I really feel like we've only touched the tip of the iceberg in terms of this whole thing. We didn't get a chance to talk about the event that you do on a regular basis called Sex Expectations. Did I say that correctly?
Yes, it is, but it's not my event. It's remember that Christian counselor that I talked to you about that is now like my spiritual mom? That's her event.
Oh, wow.
And so I have, the first one that she had last year was the event that I gave my celibacy story to the first time publicly. She kind of pushed me out the boat on that, but that's actually her event. So
I got you. No, that's incredible. So that event happens in Chicago, and
yes,
I encourage people once they check out your social media, which we're going to give them that in just a moment, and it'll also all of your connections and social media things will be on the show notes as well. But I'd encourage them to at least check the event out and all of those kinds of things. So we've only touched the tip of the iceberg in this whole conversation.
Yes,
of what it means to be a whole single. And living your life like it's golden. How about that?
Yes.
So let's do this. How can people find you? How can people connect with you? What's your social media handles and all that kind of stuff?
Okay, well, on Facebook, I am Mina Nyenke, and that's Mina, last name N as in Nancy, Yenke. That's on Facebook. On every other social media platform, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, I'm at Mina Says, which is MINASAYS.
No, this is fantastic. I'd love to invite you back maybe at some point, and we keep this conversation going. And maybe next time, my wife and I, of course, we've got a little one here at the house, and so maybe at some point we can schedule a time that will work for everybody, for her to jump on as well, because I'd love to have a married woman's perspective. And my wife is brilliant and will be able to kind of offer some additional insight in this whole conversation as well. Because candidly, as a male, we have to walk carefully and tread lightly on this, and it becomes really interesting delving into these things. But this has been amazing, Mina. I'm going to give you one last thing. If you want to say to somebody that's been listening to this, single female or single male, somebody that just needs some encouragement or some direction or some final tidbit of wisdom to help put the icing on the cake or the cherry on top, if you would, for this conversation, what would you say to them?
Well, as a believer, I can't take any credit for anything that God has done in my life. So I have to give glory to God. God is good. He's always been good. He is a deliverer. And some of those things that you think are not possible are really, really possible if you partner with God. I could not have done what I have done thus far had I not been in partnership with God. God is so awesome that He does His part when you partner with Him, and He helps you do your part. So that's like two good things in one. I would say have a conversation with God, pour out your heart to Him in a way that you have never done it before. You know, sometimes when you talk to your girlfriends or your guy friends, you kind of hold back, but with God, there's no judgment there. You can be as transparent as possible and allow Him to do surgery on your heart. And although the process may be difficult, there is light on the other side, and you will be so happy that you did the work so that you can present your best self to the world, not just to a husband, but to the world.
No, that's amazing. That is absolutely incredible. And, I've said oftentimes as we close today's podcast out, God can handle your questions. So thanks again for listening and sharing this podcast and sharing in with us on this podcast. This has been an amazing conversation where we've talked about what it means to live single and celibate and live healthy and whole and free. And today, Mina, my guest that's been on, is a living, breathing example that not only Not only is it a goal and desire for many people, but she's proven every single day that it's possible. So thank you for joining us here on The Wise Idea with Christopher J. Harris. I hope that you've enjoyed our time together. If you did and you would like additional resources and information, of course, you can find that information and more at thewiseideapodcast.com. Guess what, guys? We are also on social media and would love to have you join the conversation with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are at The Wise Idea, and we have a private Facebook group that we ask questions on and that you can dig into. We may do a couple Facebook Lives coming up here really shortly to keep this conversation going. Stay tuned for that. On Instagram, we are at The Wise Idea Podcast. And so I'd love to have you also join with me and connect with me on my personal social media. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and even, guess what, LinkedIn and Pinterest at CJ Harris ONE. Finally, if you have enjoyed what you've heard today, please do me a favor and head over to iTunes and leave a rating and a review for other listeners to find us. You can find us on Google Play as well, on Stitcher, on TuneIn, and coming soon to Spotify and iHeartRadio. I'd also love to hear from you directly. Send us an email with a conversation or questions or feedback about today's podcast and other podcasts that you've listened to at info at thewiseideapodcast.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll look forward to seeing you the next time. You know what I always say, live wisely.